The holographic display flickered with the pale blue dot suspended in the void, seemingly insignificant among the countless stars that dotted the Vorthak Empire's territorial maps. Commander Vextar's 4 eyes studied the reconnaissance data with practiced indifference, his chitinous fingers tapping against the command console in a rhythm that spoke of decades spent cataloging primitive worlds. "Analysis complete, Commander," reported his tactical officer, a younger Vorthak, whose enthusiasm for conquest had not yet been dulled by routine. "The third planet of the Sol system shows all standard markers of a Class II developing civilization. Chemical propulsion technology, basic nuclear fission capabilities, and significant internal conflict patterns." Vextar's mandibles clicked in, what passed for amusement among his species. "Internal conflicts, you say? How delightfully predictable. Show me the warfare analysis." The hologram shifted, displaying red zones scattered across the blue-green sphere. Military installations, naval formations, and what the humans called armies appeared as glowing tactical markers. To Vorthak eyes, accustomed to fleets that could glass continents, the display was almost comically modest. Their largest military vessels measure approximately 300 meters in length. The tactical officer continued, his voice carrying barely concealed contempt. "Their most advanced aircraft appear incapable of achieving orbital velocity without significant fuel staging. Most curious, Commander, they seem to be divided into nearly 200 separate territorial units, many of which maintain active hostilities with their neighbors." "Fascinating," Vextar mused, though his tone suggested anything but fascination. A species that wastes resources fighting itself rather than preparing for the inevitable expansion of superior civilizations. This should require minimal effort. 7,000 kilometers away from the alien surveillance sensors that tracked their every movement, Dr. Jiho Park hunched over his workstation in the underground laboratory of Seoul National University's Department of Theoretical Physics. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed as he stared at the energy readings that had been haunting his sleep for 3 weeks. The data made no sense according to conventional physics. Massive energy signatures were appearing and disappearing in Earth's upper atmosphere with mathematical precision, following patterns that suggested artificial origin. Yet when he cross-referenced with solar activity, atmospheric conditions, and known satellite positions, nothing correlated. "Jiho, you've been staring at those same readings for 6 hours, Dr. Mina Yoon observed as she entered the lab, carrying 2 steaming cups of fresh coffee. Her colleague's obsession with these anomalous signals had become the talk of the department, though not in a particularly flattering way. "Look at this pattern," Jiho said, accepting the coffee without taking, his eyes off the screen. "The energy bursts occur every 47.3 minutes precisely. The intensity varies, but the frequency never deviates by more than 0.2 seconds. That's not natural, Mina. That's engineered." Mina settled into the chair beside him, pulling up her own analysis of the data. "Could be equipment malfunction, could be interference from the new Chinese space station, could be a dozen things that don't involve—" She paused, studying his expression. "You think it's artificial, don't you? As in, not human artificial. Think we're being watched?" Jiho said quietly. "And I think whoever's doing the watching doesn't realize we can detect their observation methods." Meanwhile, in the command center of the Vorthak reconnaissance vessel Dominion's Edge, Commander Vextar reviewed the final intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. The humans had demonstrated their military capabilities quite thoroughly through their endless conflicts, and the results were underwhelming by any measure of galactic civilization. "Their nuclear weapons are crude fission devices," his weapons analyst reported. "Yields ranging from approximately 15 to 50,000 tons of TNT equivalent. Impressive for their technology level, but our personal shield generators could absorb those yields without significant strain." Vexitar's subordinates gathered around the tactical display as he outlined their species' standard approach to primitive world integration. "The pacification protocol remains unchanged. 3 ships, minimal ground forces, standard intimidation broadcasting. Once their governments witness the futility of resistance, they will surrender their world's resources to avoid further demonstration of our superiority." The irony was lost on the Vorthak commander that his species' very efficiency in conquering Primitive worlds had bred a dangerous overconfidence. For 3 centuries, the pacification protocol had never failed. Primitive species invariably possessed either insufficient technology to threaten Vorthak vessels or sufficient wisdom to recognize the futility of resistance. Earth appeared to fall firmly into the former category. Back in Seoul, Jiho's graduate, student Tae-ho Kim burst into the laboratory with barely contained excitement. "Professor Park, you need to see this. I've been monitoring amateur radio frequencies like you suggested, and there's something happening." The young man's laptop displayed waveform patterns that made Jiho's pulse quicken. Radio emissions and frequencies that should have been empty were showing structured patterns, complex modulations that suggested data transmission rather than natural phenomena. "This started approximately 18 minutes ago," Tae-ho explained, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "The signal strength suggests the source is somewhere beyond geostationary orbit, but the modulation patterns—" "Professor, this isn't like anything in our databases." Mina leaned forward, her skepticism warring with growing concern. "If these are artificial signals from beyond Earth orbit, then we're looking at first contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. That's the most significant event in human history, or the last event in human history," Jiho muttered, thinking of every science fiction scenario where advanced aliens viewed primitive humans as obstacles rather than potential allies. Aboard the Dominion's Edge, Captain Zekmorth received his deployment orders with the mechanical precision that characterized Vorthak military efficiency. His small fleet, 3 vessels carrying a total of fewer than 2,000 personnel, represented complete overkill for a Class II civilization, according to standard Imperial doctrine. Estimated time frame for complete planetary pacification? Zekmorth inquired of his tactical staff. 72 hours, Captain. 48 if their governments prove particularly cooperative. Zekmorth's mandibles clicked approvingly. Excellent. Prepare the standard intimidation broadcasts in their major languages: English, Mandarin, Spanish, and... He paused, consulting the linguistic analysis. Korean, apparently. These Seoul and Busan population centers may serve as effective demonstration targets if persuasion proves insufficient. As the Vorthak fleet initiated their faster-than-light transit toward Earth, Jiho Park stood before a hastily assembled panel of university administrators and government officials, his presentation displaying the increasingly obvious signs of extraterrestrial surveillance. The energy signatures had intensified, the radio emissions had become more frequent, and most alarmingly, several military satellites had reported brief system malfunctions that correlated perfectly with the anomalous readings. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jiho concluded, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his words, "we are not alone in the universe, and based on the escalating nature of these observations, we are about to make contact whether we're prepared for it or not." In the back of the room, a representative from the National Intelligence Service was already reaching for his secure phone, while military liaisons exchanged grim looks. None of them could have imagined that their first contact scenario would begin not with peaceful exploration, but with the arrival of an alien force that had never encountered a species quite like humanity. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter every assumption both species held about the nature of civilization, warfare, and survival in an unforgiving galaxy. The first sign that Captain Zekmorth's calculations might be flawed came when his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Instead of the chaotic, uncoordinated response typical of primitive civilizations, his sensors detected an immediate and systematic shift in human activity patterns across the entire planet. "Status report," Zekmorth commanded, as his flagship, the Subjugator, settled into formation with its 2 escort vessels. "Curious, Captain," his sensor operator replied, mandibles clicking in confusion. "The humans appear to have detected our arrival. Their communication networks show unprecedented activity spikes, and their military installations are transitioning to what appears to be maximum alert status." Zekmorth dismissed the concern with characteristic Vorthak arrogance. "Irrelevant. Initiate standard intimidation protocol Alpha. Disable 3 of their primitive communication satellites and broadcast surrender demands." Their panic response will accelerate capitulation. 8,000 kilometers below, Major Sunho Choi of the Republic of Korea Air Force stood in the command center at Osan Air Base, watching displays that showed every military installation on Earth lighting up like festival decorations. The Americans at NORAD, the Russians at their Space Command Center, the Chinese military. Everyone was seeing the same impossible readings. Sir, we're receiving coordination requests from 73 different national military commands, reported Lieutenant Dayon-ko, her voice tight with controlled tension. They're all asking for our analysis of the energy signatures Dr. Park reported yesterday. Sunho's jaw tightened. Yesterday, Dr. Park's warnings had been dismissed as academic paranoia. Today, 3 massive objects had appeared at the edge of their solar system, and humanity's supposedly primitive detection systems were tracking them with uncomfortable precision. Patch me through to Pacific Command, Sunho ordered. And get me a direct line to Dr. Park's team. If they predicted this, they might know what comes next. Aboard the subjugator, Captain Zekmorth watched with growing irritation as his intimidation display produced exactly the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of panicked surrender broadcasts, the humans had somehow coordinated a global military response within minutes of his fleet's arrival. Captain, their response is unusual, his tactical officer reported hesitantly. Rather than surrendering, they appear to be activating defensive systems we didn't detect during reconnaissance. Impossible, Zekmorth snapped. Show me. The holographic display revealed a planet transformed. Where reconnaissance had shown scattered, uncoordinated military installations, sensors now detected a web of interconnected defense networks. Radar installations that had appeared primitive were suddenly operating in coordinated arrays. Missile systems previously catalogued as short-range were being repositioned with obvious strategic intent. Dr. Jiho Park had not slept in 36 hours. The university's physics laboratory had been transformed into an impromptu war room, with government officials, military liaisons, and scientists working side by side to understand the alien technology that now hung at the edge of their solar system. The energy signatures are consistent with gravitational manipulation, Jiho explained to the assembled group, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. They're not using chemical propulsion or even conventional ion drives. They're literally warping space-time to achieve movement. Dr. Mina Yoon pulled up her analysis on the main display, which means their vessels are probably generating massive quantum field distortions. In theory, if we could identify the frequency of those distortions, we could disrupt them, finished Dr. Hyeri Lim from KAIST, who had been rushed to Seoul when the crisis began. But we'd need to understand their field harmonics first, and we'd need a way to generate counter-frequencies on a scale that could affect ships of that size. Taeho Kim looked up from his monitoring station, excitement cutting through the exhaustion in his voice. Professors, I'm picking up their communication attempts. They're broadcasting surrender demands in multiple languages, including Korean. The room fell silent as Taeho activated the speakers. An artificial voice speaking Korean with perfect pronunciation but utterly alien intonation filled the laboratory. Primitive inhabitants of the third planetary body, you will cease all military activities and prepare for integration into the Vorthak Empire. Resistance will result in demonstrative destruction of your population centers. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply. Major Sunho received the same message at Osan Air Base, along with similar broadcasts being monitored worldwide. But instead of inspiring terror, the aliens' ultimatum had an unexpected effect on human military commanders who had spent careers preparing for conventional warfare. They're giving us 24 hours, Sunho observed to his staff. That's not the behavior of an overwhelmingly superior force. That's the behavior of someone who wants to avoid a fight. Lieutenant Dayon-ko studied the tactical displays showing the alien fleet's position. They're maintaining formation at extreme range, sir. If they could simply destroy us from there, why issue ultimatums at all? The question hung in the air, as communication networks around the world buzzed with similar observations. Humanity's military leaders, accustomed to analyzing threats and weaknesses, were reaching an uncomfortable conclusion. The aliens might not be as invincible as they wanted Earth to believe. Captain Zekmorth's confidence began to crack when his demonstration attack failed catastrophically. He had selected what appeared to be a minor military installation, Osan Air Base, for a precision strike that would showcase Vorthak superiority without causing excessive collateral damage. The energy beam that lanced down from the subjugator should have vaporized the installation and surrounding area. Instead, it struck some kind of deflection field that hadn't existed moments before, dispersing the weapon's energy across several square kilometers of empty terrain. "Report!" Zekmorth snarled as his bridge crew scrambled to understand what had happened. "Unknown defensive technology, Captain," his weapons officer replied, all four eyes wide with shock. "The humans somehow projected a deflection field that redistributed our weapons' energy. That should be impossible with their primitive technology." What Zekmorth didn't know was that Dr. Hieri's team had successfully adapted theoretical quantum field equations into a practical defense system in less than 18 hours. Using the base's communication array as an improvised field generator, they had created humanity's first energy shield through sheer desperation and brilliant improvisation. The real shock came 30 seconds later, when Osan Air Base responded to the alien attack with a coordinated strike that no Vorthak tactical computer had predicted. Lieutenant Daeon Ko, flying a modified F-16 that had been hastily equipped with quantum sensors developed by Jiho's team, led a squadron that attacked not where the alien ships were, but where they were going to be. The humans had turned their space debris tracking systems, originally designed to monitor orbital junk, into a predictive algorithm that could calculate the alien ship's movement patterns. Combined with conventional missiles modified with quantum guidance systems, the result was a precision strike that caught the Vorthak completely off guard. 2 of Zekmorth's 3 ships suffered critical damage in the first human counterattack. The Dominator lost propulsion and life support, while the Conquest took a direct hit to its command center. Only the Subjugator remained fully operational, and its captain found himself facing a tactical situation that violated every assumption. His species held about primitive warfare. "How?" Zekmorth whispered, staring at the tactical display that showed his supposedly invincible fleet, crippled by creatures that shouldn't have been able to threaten a single Vorthak fighter craft. His answer came in the form of intercepted human communications that his universal translator decoded with growing horror. The humans weren't panicking. They weren't surrendering. They were coordinating, adapting, and learning from every exchange. Dr. Jiho Park's voice crackled over the communication networks as he shared tactical data with military commanders worldwide. Their ships generate quantum signatures that follow predictable patterns. If we can map those patterns, we can anticipate their movements and their weapon trajectories. Captain Zekmorth realized, with the cold certainty that had once made him an effective predator, that he was no longer the hunter in this engagement. Somehow, impossibly, he had become the prey. The first day of what should have been a routine conquest was ending with a damaged Vorthak fleet facing an enemy that refused to behave like any primitive species in recorded galactic history. And, somewhere in the depths of space, emergency transmissions were already racing toward the Vorthak Empire, carrying news that would shatter their understanding of what it meant to be truly dangerous in an unforgiving universe. The transformation of human civilization began at 0347 GMT, exactly 18 hours after the failed Vorthak demonstration attack. What the aliens had intended as a show of overwhelming force had instead triggered something they had never encountered. In 3 centuries of conquest, a species-wide evolutionary leap driven by pure survival instinct. Engineer Wanho Jiang stood in the hastily converted Samsung Electronics facility in Suwon, watching production lines that had manufactured smartphones 12 hours earlier, now churning out quantum disruptor devices based on Dr. Jiho Park's revolutionary equations. The site defied every principle of industrial logistics, yet somehow it was working. Production rate? Wanho called out to his floor supervisor, a woman who had been assembling memory chips yesterday and was now coordinating the manufacture of humanity's first space-age weapons. 12,000 units per hour across all lines, she replied, her voice carrying the same determined efficiency that had made Korean manufacturing legendary. We've retrofitted 17 other facilities nationwide. Total projected output, 300,000 disruptors within 72 hours. The numbers should have been impossible. The technology should have taken years to develop and months to manufacture. Instead, humanity's industrial base was performing a miracle of adaptation that no Vorthak strategic computer could have predicted. Captain Zekmorth paced the bridge of his crippled flagship, studying intelligence reports that made increasingly little sense. His remaining functional sensors detected massive shifts in human activity patterns, but the changes followed no logical pattern for a primitive civilization under siege. Status report on human industrial capacity, he demanded from his intelligence officer. Incomprehensible, Captain, came the reply. They appear to be converting civilian manufacturing facilities for military production at rates that exceed theoretical maximums for their technology level. Our models suggest such conversion should require months of retooling, yet they're achieving it in hours. Zekmorth's 4 eyes narrowed. Show me the analysis. The holographic display revealed a planet in the grip of transformation. Factories across every continent were shifting production lines with mechanical precision that spoke of decades of practice in rapid industrial adaptation. What the Vorthak couldn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Every economic crisis, every natural disaster, every war had taught the species to rebuild, retool, and adapt with increasing speed. Into Seoul's underground command center, communications specialist Nari Seo made the breakthrough that would change the course of the conflict. For 36 hours, she had been analyzing the alien transmissions, searching for patterns in their communication protocols. I've got something, she announced to the assembled team of linguists, cryptographers, and physicists. Their communication system isn't just transmitting messages, it's synchronized to their ship movements and weapon systems. Dr. Mina Yoon looked up from her quantum field calculations. You mean their communications network is integrated with their tactical systems? More than that, Nari replied, her excitement building. I think their entire fleet operates on synchronized quantum frequencies. If we can identify the base harmonic, we might be able to disrupt their coordination entirely. The implications hit the room like a physical force. Dr. Hyeri Lim began running calculations on her tablet, while Taiho Kim started mapping the frequency patterns Nari had isolated. Within minutes, they had identified something the Vorthak had never imagined. Their greatest tactical advantage was also their most vulnerable weakness. Major Sunho Choi received the intelligence update while coordinating with military commanders across 6 continents. The global response to the alien threat had evolved beyond anything in human military history. A planetary defense network that operated without central command, yet maintained perfect coordination. The scientists think they can disrupt the aliens' fleet coordination, he reported to the Joint Chiefs of Staff assembled via secure video link. But they need time to build the necessary transmission equipment, and they need the aliens to remain within a specific orbital range. General Martinez from NORAD leaned forward. How long do they need? 18 hours for construction, 6 hours for deployment, Sunho replied. The question is whether we can keep the aliens engaged without letting them retreat to a safe distance. Colonel Petrov from Russian Space Command smiled grimly. Leave that to us. If there's one thing humans excel at, it's being unpredictably aggressive when cornered. The coordinated harassment campaign that followed demonstrated humanity's genius for asymmetric warfare. Rather than attempting direct confrontation with superior technology, human forces began implementing tactics that no military academy had ever taught, but that came naturally to a species raised on guerrilla warfare and insurgent strategies. Lieutenant Dean Ko led the aerial component, using modified civilian aircraft in ways that violated every principle of conventional air combat. Her squadron included cargo pilots, crop dusters, and even civilian hobbyists flying experimental aircraft, all equipped with quantum disruptors and operating under tactics that changed minute by minute. Captain Zekmorth found his remaining vessel under constant harassment from attacks that made no tactical sense. Human aircraft would appear from impossible angles, deliver precision strikes, and vanish before his weapons could target them. Worse, each attack seemed to anticipate his defensive responses with uncanny accuracy. How are they predicting our countermeasures? He demanded of his tactical officer. Unknown, Captain. Their attack patterns suggest they're using some form of predictive analysis that accounts for our standard defensive protocols. What the Vorthak didn't understand was that humanity's chaotic nature was itself a weapon. Commercial pilot Biom Kwak, flying a converted passenger jet equipped with Wanho's quantum disruptors, was operating under tactical guidelines that encouraged improvisation and adaptation over rigid adherence to strategy. Control, this is Ghost 7. Biom's voice crackled over the communication network. I'm seeing an opening in their defensive formation. Permission to attempt an unorthodox approach? Negative, Ghost 7, came the formal military response. Maintain assigned attack vector. Copy that, Control, Biom replied, then immediately deviated from his assigned route to exploit the weakness he had spotted. His improvised attack succeeded brilliantly, proving once again that human unpredictability was more effective than textbook tactics. Dr. Jiho Park watched the real-time tactical displays from his position in the Joint Command Center, marveling at what his species was accomplishing. The quantum interference grid was taking shape faster than any of his calculations had suggested possible. With communication arrays, power grids, and even civilian internet infrastructure being converted into components of a planet-wide defensive system. Status on the grid construction? He asked Wanho, who was coordinating the technical implementation from his position at the Samsung facility. Ahead of schedule, Wanho replied via secure link. We're integrating civilian infrastructure in ways that shouldn't work, but somehow do. The internet backbone is providing quantum coherence pathways we never anticipated. The breakthrough came when Taeho Kim, working with Nari's communication intercepts, successfully hacked into the Vorthak tactical network. For 17 minutes he maintained access to their command systems, downloading intelligence that revealed the true scope of what humanity was facing. They're not just scouts, Taeho announced, his voice tight with newly understood implications. They're an advance force. There's a larger fleet en route, and they're expecting this to be finished before reinforcements arrive. The news should have been devastating. Instead, it galvanized human efforts with renewed purpose. Dr. Hyeri's team accelerated their work on the quantum interference grid, while military commanders worldwide began preparing for a conflict that would determine whether humanity survived its first encounter with galactic civilization. As the third day of contact dawned, Captain Zekmorth found himself commanding a single functional starship against an entire planet that had somehow transformed from primitive to genuinely threatening in less than 72 hours. His calls for reinforcement had gone unanswered, his tactical advantages had been systematically neutralized, and worst of all, the humans showed no signs of the fear or desperation that should have accompanied their seemingly hopeless situation. Instead, they displayed something far more dangerous: the cold determination of a species that had decided to win regardless of the odds. The stage was set for a confrontation that would redefine what it meant to be truly dangerous in a universe full of threats. Admiral Thexfor's reinforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find the Sol system under complete Vorthak control. Instead, his sensors detected something that violated every principle of galactic conquest doctrine. Captain Zekmorth's advance force was not only still engaged in combat, but appeared to be losing. Status report, Thexfor commanded as his flagship, the massive dreadnought Galactic Dominion aligned with its escort vessels. His fleet consisted of 12 ships carrying over 50,000 troops, overwhelming force for any primitive civilization. Incomprehensible. Greetings, Admiral, his sensor operator reported, mandibles clicking with confusion. The advance force has suffered severe casualties. Captain Zekmorth's vessel is barely operational, and the human defensive capabilities have somehow increased exponentially since initial contact. Thexfor studied the tactical displays with growing disbelief. The planet below pulsed with energy signatures that suggested advanced defensive networks, while the space around Earth buzzed with activity that spoke of a civilization far more sophisticated than their reconnaissance had indicated. On Earth, the completion of the quantum interference grid had transformed the planet into something unprecedented in galactic history. A world-sized weapon system built from repurposed civilian infrastructure. Dr. Mina Yoon stood in the primary control center, watching displays that showed every major city, communication hub, and power grid on the planet operating in perfect synchronization. "Grid status report," she called out to the technicians monitoring the system from 12 different countries. "Seoul grid online and stable," reported Wan Ho Jiang from his position at the converted Samsung facility. "Tokyo, London, New York, and Mumbai grids showing green across all parameters. We're achieving quantum coherence across 17,000 individual nodes." Dr. Hyeri Lim looked up from her calculations, excitement and terror warring in her expression. "Mina, the power levels we're generating. This isn't just a defensive system anymore. We've accidentally created a weapon that could potentially affect targets anywhere in the solar system." The implications of what humanity had built began to sink in. What had started as a desperate defensive measure had evolved into something that bordered on the impossible. A planetary civilization that had become a single integrated war machine in less than 4 days. Admiral Thexvor's confidence evaporated when his first probing attack encountered the quantum interference grid, the energy beam that should have penetrated Earth's atmosphere and devastated a major population center instead, struck an invisible barrier that not only absorbed the weapon's energy, but somehow redirected it back toward his fleet. "Evasive maneuvers," Thexvor shouted as his own weapon's energy lanced back at the galactic dominion. The dreadnought's shields absorbed the redirected blast, but the psychological impact was devastating. In 3 centuries of conquest, no Vorthak fleet had ever been attacked with their own weapons. "Analysis," he demanded from his tactical staff. "The humans have somehow created a planetary defense grid that operates on quantum interference principles." His chief science officer reported, all 4 eyes wide with shock. "Their entire planet is functioning as a single, coordinated defensive system. Admiral, this should be impossible for a Class II civilization." Communications specialist Nari Seo had become something more than a translator in the 4 days since first contact. Working with captured alien equipment and her growing understanding of Vorthak psychology, she had developed humanity's first xenopsychological warfare protocols. "I'm ready to attempt communication with their command structure," she announced to the Joint Military Command. "Based on the behavioral patterns I've observed, the Vorthak operate under rigid hierarchical systems that become vulnerable when their assumptions are challenged." Major Sunho Choi studied the tactical situation from his position at the Global Coordination Center. "What kind of vulnerability are we talking about?" "Their entire military doctrine is based on technological supremacy over primitive species," Nari explained. "When that supremacy is challenged, their command structure begins to fracture. I believe I can exploit that fracture to create confusion in their fleet." The psychological warfare campaign that Nari launched was unlike anything in human military history. Using the aliens' own communication systems against them, she began broadcasting carefully crafted messages designed to exploit the Vorthak's growing uncertainty about what they were truly facing. Her first broadcast reached Admiral Thexvor's fleet as they prepared for a massive assault on Earth's major population centers. "Vorthak vessels, this is Earth Defense Command. We know you expected to find a primitive civilization. Instead, you have encountered the advance guard of the Terran Galactic Defense Alliance. Your reconnaissance was deliberately allowed to observe only our obsolete military systems. Prepare to face our true capabilities." The message was a complete fabrication, but it was delivered with such confidence and backed by such obvious technological capability that Thexvor's tactical staff began to question everything they thought they knew about human civilization. Dr. Ji-ho Park's greatest breakthrough came when Tae-ho Kim successfully maintained a stable connection to the alien fleet's navigation systems. For the first time since the conflict began, humanity had real-time access to Vorthak strategic planning. "They're preparing for a coordinated assault on 12 major population centers," Tae-ho reported from his hacking station. "But their targeting data is based on outdated reconnaissance. They don't realize how extensively we've modified our defensive view infrastructure." Ji-ho studied the alien attack plans with growing excitement. "They're still thinking like conquerors facing a primitive enemy. Show me their fleet positioning." The tactical display revealed the classic Vorthak formation. Overwhelming. Force concentrated for maximum psychological impact. It was a strategy that had worked flawlessly against every other species they had encountered, but it contained a fatal flaw when facing an opponent who understood their methods. Wanho, Jiho called to his engineering coordinator. Can we focus the entire grid's output on a single point in space? Theoretically, yes, Wanho replied after a moment of calculation. But the power levels would be unprecedented. We'd essentially be creating a localized quantum singularity. Do it. Lieutenant Daeun Ko led humanity's most audacious military operation as Admiral Thexvor's fleet moved into assault formation. Her mission was not to defeat the alien vessels through conventional combat, but to capture their command ship intact, a task that required precision, timing, and a level of tactical improvisation that no military academy had ever taught. Ghost Squadron, this is Ghost Leader, she transmitted to her mixed formation of military pilots, civilian aviators, and volunteers flying everything from fighter jets to converted cargo planes. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their flagship. We're trying to board it. The plan was insane by any rational military standard. Using the quantum disruptors as guidance systems and modified civilian aircraft as delivery vehicles, Daeun's squadron would attempt to penetrate the alien ship's defenses and deliver boarding parties directly to its command center. Commercial, pilot Byung Kwak, flying a converted passenger jet loaded with Special Forces troops, checked his instruments one final time. Ghost 7 ready for insertion run. This is either the most brilliant tactical plan in human history or the most spectacular suicide mission. Probably both, Daeun replied with grim humor. Execute on my mark. The assault that followed defied every principle of space combat doctrine. Human aircraft operating in formations that changed second by second penetrated the Vorthak defensive perimeter through sheer unpredictability. Admiral Thexvor watched in horror as his meticulously planned formation was systematically dismantled by opponents who seemed to anticipate his every countermove. The boarding action succeeded through a combination of desperate courage and the aliens' complete inability to adapt to humanity's chaotic tactics. Within 30 minutes of the assault's beginning, Korean Special Forces led by Lieutenant Daeun Ko had captured the Galactic Dominion's command center and taken Admiral Thexvor prisoner. But the real victory came when Dr. Hyeri's team activated the planetary quantum grid at full power. The energy beam that lanced out from Earth didn't destroy the remaining Vorthak vessels. It demonstrated something far more terrifying to a species accustomed to technological supremacy. The beam carved a perfect sphere out of a nearby asteroid, vaporizing rock and metal with surgical precision, while leaving everything outside the target area completely untouched. The message was unmistakable. Earth could destroy any target anywhere in the solar system with perfect accuracy. Admiral Thexvor, secured in the makeshift detention facility aboard his own captured flagship, stared at the tactical displays showing his fleet's complete defeat. For the first time in Vorthak history, a primitive species had not only resisted conquest, but had turned the tables entirely. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence in Admiral Thexvor's detention cell was broken only by the soft hum of human technology, systems that should not have existed on a primitive world, operated by beings who should not have been capable of capturing a Vorthak dreadnought. The Admiral's four eyes studied his captors with a mixture of fear and fascination that no member of his species had ever experienced. Communications specialist Nari Seo sat across from the alien commander, her tablet displaying psychological profiles that had taken her team 72 hours to develop. The interrogation techniques she was about to employ existed nowhere in human military doctrine, because no human had ever needed to break an alien mind before. Admiral Thexvor, she began, her voice carrying the calm authority that had made her humanity's first xenopsychologist. You're wondering how a Class II civilization managed to defeat your fleet. The answer is simple. We were never a Class II civilization. Your reconnaissance was catastrophically inadequate. The lie came easily, backed by the undeniable evidence of Earth's transformed defensive capabilities. What Nari didn't tell the Admiral was that humanity had indeed been exactly as primitive as his scouts had reported, until the moment his species had threatened their existence. Dr. Mina Yoon stood in the primary control center of the quantum grid, watching displays that showed the captured Vorthak vessels being systematically analyzed by teams of scientists who had learned more about advanced technology in 1 week than their species had discovered in the previous century. Status report. On the technology integration, she called to Dr. Harry Lim, who was coordinating the reverse engineering efforts from the KAIST facility. Remarkable progress, Harry replied via secure link. Their gravity manipulation systems are based on principles we theorized but never thought we could implement. With some modifications, we should be able to adapt their technology to human manufacturing within months rather than decades. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not just surviving first contact. They were leapfrogging millennia of technological development by studying their would-be conquerors' equipment. Taiho Kim had become Earth's first interstellar intelligence analyst. His breakthrough into the Vorthak communication networks providing insights that chilled every human who understood their significance. The star charts he had downloaded revealed a galaxy dominated by the Vorthak Empire, with hundreds of conquered worlds and dozens of species that had been absorbed or eliminated entirely. The scope of their empire is sobering, he reported to the Joint Command Council. But there's something else. According to their databases, they've classified Earth as something called a Class 7 hazardous world. That classification apparently hasn't been used in over 2 centuries. Major Sun-Ho Choi studied the intelligence reports with growing understanding. What does Class 7 hazardous mean in their system? Near as I can tell, Taiho replied, it's reserved for civilizations that pose an existential threat to the Vorthak Empire itself. Not just military threats, civilizations whose very existence is considered dangerous to their way of life. The revelation sent ripples through Earth's command structure. Humanity had not simply repelled an invasion. They had apparently demonstrated capabilities that frightened one of the galaxy's dominant military powers. Engineer Won-Ho Jung was supervising the most ambitious construction project in human history. The conversion of Earth's industrial infrastructure to support technologies that had been pure science fiction a week earlier. The captured Vorthak vessels provided not just examples of advanced engineering, but complete manufacturing databases that showed how such technology could be mass-produced. Production estimates for the first human-built faster-than-light vessels? He reported to the emergency session of world leaders gathered via secure connection. Optimistic timeline: 18 months for prototypes, 5 years for mass production, Won-Ho replied. But that assumes we can adapt their gravitational manipulation systems to our existing power grid infrastructure. Dr. Jiho Park, who had started this journey as a theoretical physicist studying anomalous energy readings, now found himself at the center of humanity's transformation into an interstellar civilization. The quantum interference grid that had saved Earth was being studied by teams around the world, its principles forming the foundation for technologies that would reshape human society. The long-term implications are staggering, he explained to the assembled world leaders. We've essentially built a planetary defense system that could theoretically be scaled up to protect entire star systems. More importantly, we've proven that human ingenuity can overcome seemingly impossible technological disadvantages. The negotiations for Admiral Thexvor's release took place not in any government building, but in the same university laboratory, where Dr. Jiho had first detected the alien surveillance. The symbolism was intentional. Humanity wanted the Vorthak to understand that their defeat had begun with scientific curiosity, not military preparation. Your terms are unprecedented, Admiral Thexvor admitted as Nari presented the conditions for his fleet's withdrawal. No primitive species has ever dictated terms to the Vorthak Empire. Perhaps, Nari replied with a smile that contained no warmth. That's because you've never encountered a species quite like humanity before. The terms were simple but revolutionary: complete withdrawal of all Vorthak forces from the Sol system, recognition of Earth as an independent world, and most importantly, transmission of humanity's new status to every corner of the Vorthak Empire. Earth was no longer to be considered a target for conquest. It was to be avoided entirely. But Nari had added one additional condition that would reshape galactic politics: Any species currently under Vorthak occupation would be informed that resistance was possible, and that Earth stood ready to provide technological assistance to anyone seeking to throw off Imperial control. The demonstration that accompanied the Admiral's release was visible throughout the solar system. Dr. Mina's team used the quantum grid to redirect a passing comet, changing its trajectory with precision that showcased Earth's ability to manipulate celestial objects. The message was unmistakable. Humanity could now reach any target anywhere in their star system. Lieutenant Daeun Ko stood on the observation deck of the captured Vorthak flagship, now renamed New Horizon, and serving as humanity's first interstellar vessel. Her mission was no longer defensive. She was preparing to lead humanity's first expedition beyond the solar system, using modified alien technology and tactics that no galactic power would expect. "Flight status?" she asked commercial pilot Biom Kwok, who had transitioned from flying passenger jets to piloting humanity's most advanced spacecraft. "All systems green," Biom replied, his voice carrying the same calm professionalism that had made him an excellent civilian pilot and now made him an exceptional starship commander. "We're ready to begin humanity's expansion into the galaxy." The final scene played out in the same Seoul laboratory where it had all begun. Dr. Ji-ho Park stood before banks of monitors showing communication intercepts from across the galaxy, dozens of alien civilizations sharing warnings about the unpredictable warriors of the third planet. The Vorthak Empire's attempt to quietly add Earth to their collection of conquered worlds had instead announced humanity's existence to every spacefaring species within 1,000 light-years. More importantly, it had announced that the galaxy now contained a civilization that could turn apparent weakness into overwhelming strength through sheer adaptability and ingenuity. Communications specialist Nari monitored the galactic networks that humanity now had access to, translating the growing chatter about Earth's unexpected victory. The messages ranged from curiosity to fear to something that surprised her. Hope from species that had thought resistance to galactic empires was impossible. "Status report on galactic communications?" Major Sunho asked as he reviewed humanity's new role in interstellar politics. "Mixed reactions," Nari replied. "The established powers are reassessing their threat evaluations of primitive worlds. But more interesting are the messages we're receiving from occupied systems, species asking if Earth's victory means that liberation is possible." The transformation was complete. In less than 2 weeks, humanity had evolved from an isolated, primitive species to a galactic power that other civilizations either feared or looked to for inspiration. The aliens had thought Earth was easy prey, but they had awakened something far more dangerous. A species that treated impossible odds as merely another problem to solve through innovation, adaptation, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. Azir, Admiral Thexvor's remaining vessels disappeared into hyperspace, carrying news of humanity's victory to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Earth began preparing for the next phase of its unexpected journey among the stars. The age of human isolation was over, and the galaxy would never be the same.